Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this edition of Cook Like a Rebel. Salud, pros, cheers. We are so excited to bring you tonight's edition. We have Chef Pete Ghione and Master Sommelier Joseph Phillips. And this theme tonight is something that is so special because, as you know, February is Heart Month, and this is Be Heart Smart. So it's all about being healthy, taking care of your heart. And tonight, we're going to show you how to make some great dishes, drink a little bit of wine, and have a good time. So without further ado, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Chef Pete Ghione. He's going to tell you a little bit about some great dishes. He's going to also tell you a little bit about the flavors of life, which is a cool thing that he's part of. And then he's going to cook up some great dishes for you. So Chef Pete Ghione started his cooking career 24 years ago in Shelton, Connecticut, where he held two jobs simultaneously while in high school prior to graduating from New England Culinary Institute in Burlington, Vermont. After graduation, he moved from Napa, California to take on Las Vegas, Nevada. At the age of only 26, he was promoted to executive chef at the Rio All-Suite Hotel and Casino. He managed a staff of 550 people, 16 restaurants, and 22 kitchens in total, and fed an average of 16,000 people per day. During his time at the Rio, Chef Pete was also one of 5 chefs on Team Las Vegas, which was the first year Las Vegas was represented at the World Culinary Olympics in Erfurt, Germany. Now, the team took home a silver medal that year. After 7 years total with Caesars Entertainment, Chef Pete began working at Dragon Ridge Country Club in Henderson, Nevada. It was there where Chef Pete started working with organic ingredients to benefit the members. After building a close relationship with a doctor who specializes in preventive health care, Chef opened his own organic restaurant and really began to specialize in nutrition and inspire people to eat healthy and lose weight. After the restaurant business, Chef began his own business as a private chef and started to specialize in preparing meals with a healthy purpose. A major focus of his was cooking for cancer patients and those recovering from cancer. In September of 2015, Chef was given an amazing opportunity to work for Canyon Ranch Spa Club in Las Vegas, Nevada, and operate 2 organic restaurants, and again, regain his passion for cooking food with a healing, healthy purpose. Now, remember, this is Rebels Give, and this is part of Rebels Give Week, and today, Chef Pete Ghione is going to give us a great experience here. So ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I give you Chef Pete Ghione.
I feel like I should bow after that. So thank you for the introduction. One of the things that I work with, as mentioned, was Flavors for Life. And we specialize in a 3-month curriculum in the high schools. And we teach culinary arts kids how to eat and cook healthy. So I'm grateful for this opportunity where I can share with you some of the ingredients that I've used to influence people's health and inspire you to use some of these ingredients on your own. Now, we live in a world, especially in a country, where somebody dies of a cardiovascular related death every 38 seconds. And so this presentation is going to be about 30 minutes. And my goal at the end of that is to start changing that number to hopefully 1 minute to 2 minutes to 5 minutes and sometime in our lifetime. And I really feel that food can influence people's health. So I want to share with you a dish. We're going to make some sweet potato gnocchi with the tomato pomodoro. And gnocchi is an Italian style pasta made with some potatoes. And the pomodoro is a very fast, easy to make a tomato sauce. And then I'm going to put a little bit of Swiss chard on it. Just a couple days ago, I did another presentation for some elementary school students with Green Our Planet. And greenourplanet.org is an organization that installs gardens, indoor and outdoor, into elementary schools, and they teach the kids how to grow their own food. And chefs like me will take ingredients from the garden and teach the kids what they could do that's really exciting and fun. So just Tuesday, I worked with some kindergarten kids, and then I worked with some fifth graders. And if you had the opportunity to work with 90 plus kindergarten kids that don't know how to find their mute button, it was something to experience. And so I'm very grateful to be working with you tonight as well. And I'm going to use some of that Swiss chard from that dish that I used from their garden and show you how we can use some of the ingredients that are grown here locally in Las Vegas. So to get started, we're going to work with, and if you're following along, feel free to pop into the chat and say that I'm talking too much or I'm going too fast and you want to catch up. So hopefully you are going to cook along. But I pre-roasted the sweet potatoes so you didn't have to stare at my oven for too long. And we can get started with this dish. So there's a couple ways that we could puree these to make them smooth. So the idea is to have a nice lump-free sweet potato. And all I did was coat them with a little bit of oil, and I put them at 400 degrees in my oven. They took a little bit over an hour. It was probably about an hour and 15 minutes, and they're really nice and soft. So with that, you can use, if you have a box cheese grater, you can grate it like that. You can put them into a bowl and break them up with a wire whisk, or I have a food mill. It works great for that. So we're going to start out with about a pound. And all I did was I found some sweet potatoes that weigh about a pound. And sweet potatoes have some really good phytochemicals that are good for the cardiovascular system and help with that. So that's why I chose these, because they're a little bit lower in sugar as well versus a regular baked potato. So first I'm going to throw my knife. And then we're going to peel it. And once they come out of the oven, the skin comes right off. And I let these cool for probably only about 10 minutes. So the inside is probably going to still be really hot. So it's nice to work with this while they're still hot. If they get cold, the starches kind of change a little bit and they become a little bit more gluey to work with and not as easy to make a gnocchi. And the idea of a gnocchi is that they're going to cook really fast. As soon as they float, they're done. And then they're really light and fluffy, like little pillows. So that's the goal with this. Okay. So I like to work over a bowl so that I don't get a mess all over my cutting board and I can keep working nicely. And then we are going to break these up right into our food mill. And you can see it's hot, really hot. Now, to help it from sticking to the bowl, I'm going to put a little bit of flour down first. So with the 1 pound of sweet potatoes, if it's a little bit over, you can see that once you peel it, you're going to lose a little bit. And it really, you're just going to be able to adjust it with the amount of flour you add. So 1 pound of sweet potatoes cooked and peeled. And then I have 12 ounces of flour measured out. And if they're still a little bit too soft, then I have some extra flour just so we can thicken it up a little bit. So you can see this comes out right out the bottom. And then we want to get all of the leftovers, clean out the bottom, and then we'll start to add our flour. So really with this, there's a lot of different things. Now I used to use gnocchis and add some horseradish to it and serve it with some braised short ribs. Really high, the animal products are really high in saturated fats, which are really bad for the heart. And when people add salt to that too, or high sodium, I should say, not necessarily salt, but high sodium, then that makes the saturated fats that are in your bloodstream really sticky. And that's when it starts to stick to the walls of your arteries and your veins. And that's what puts a lot of stress on your heart too. So some of these ingredients are going to help either reduce inflammation. We're going to use strictly plant-based ingredients. So nothing I'm using tonight ever had a mother. And we're going to add some things like turmeric, and I'm going to teach some tricks too with the turmeric into the gnocchi. So you really don't taste it, but you're going to get the anti-inflammatory properties from it. It's going to help your blood flow a little bit smoother. And then we're going to add some black pepper to that, because black pepper makes turmeric 2,000 times more absorbable by your body. Turmeric is a great superfood, but even if you take the supplements, it's hard for your body to absorb. So that trick will help you absorb it. So I'm going to start out, I said 12 ounces of all-purpose flour, and I'm going to add most of it. Every potato is going to be a little bit different. It's going to have a little bit different water content. So we can always add more flour, really hard to add less. And then I'm just going to work this into a dough. And it can all be done by hand. You don't need any special tools to do it. And just incorporate the potatoes. And now we get that flour almost mixed. So what I'm going to add is a good serving, a good rule of thumb for turmeric is a 1/4 teaspoon per serving with a pinch of black pepper. So this is going to make a little bit over 2 servings. You'll have a little bit extra that you could freeze the gnocchis as well when we're done, unless you like to eat a lot and you love it, or you want to share it. Then you can cook it all fresh too. Then I'm going to use a plant-based and Parmesan cheese. Now people say that vegan cheese is really, not the same. However, I find that Parmesan cheese is really, really close. I prefer to use Good Planet. If you can't find Good Planet in a retail store, then BioLife is another great one as well. And it's got a delicious flavor to it. So we're just going to add about a tablespoon worth. And then we add a little bit of salt, and that'll enhance the flavors. However, we're going to add salted water when we boil it too. So it's going to take on that water. So making it super salty right now is not necessary. Once we get this mixed, we're going to let the dough rest. And that's going to help the proteins and the gluten in the flour relax a little bit so that we can roll it and cook it. Nowadays, people find that gluten is really hard to digest. And there's a couple things that I found is that, first of all, the wheat is grown differently now, and it's made to resist disease and to grow in abundance. And the purpose of that is to really feed the nation, and so that we don't go hungry, we don't run out of food. So there is a scientific purpose to it. However, the more that we change our food, because our brains are really smart with science, and we can create all these new things. You hear about these plant-based proteins and all this different, chicken grown in the lab and all that fancy stuff. But the problem is that our body and our digestive system doesn't have that app update. We don't get to plug it in overnight and it just resets and learns new things. It's the same antiquated system that we've always had. So as we introduce new foods, it's not really sure what to do with it. So wheat is the same way. We find all these allergies, but also in baking, when the flour is milled, the gluten has a dormancy period between 3 months and 1 year of it being a flour in a bag sitting on the shelf. If bread or dough or anything is made with that flour between that 3-month and 1 year period, it's a lot harder for our body to digest it. So people think that they have this overly sensitive reaction to eating bread or gluten. However, it's that dormancy period. So once it's turned into a loaf of bread, it doesn't have that traceability where you say, oh, this flour was old or right in that dormancy period when they baked the bread. You don't see that traceability. But if you're making it yourself and you can see the mill date on your flour, then you'll know the difference. So at Canyon Ranch Spa and Fitness at the Venetian Resort, we make sure that we pay attention to that. And typically we'll use in our recipes 51% whole grain flour, because that whole grain is harder for your body to digest and absorb. And it takes longer for that sugar to hit your bloodstream. Okay, when you have white flour, all that stuff is really easy to break down, digest, and absorb, and you get huge spikes in blood sugar, leads to diabetes, feeds cancer cells, and does a lot of different things like that too, which has negative side effects, even though it's not refined. So now you can wrap this in plastic wrap. If you don't want to wrap it in plastic wrap, you could use a bag. We're going to leave it at room temperature. If you want to express it, you could always put it in the refrigerator. And we're going to set that aside. Okay. I always have a little bit extra food when I do a demonstration in case I drop something on the floor. I always got a backup plan. So that's why I have the extra sweet potato there too. So next we're gonna make our pomodoro. So we're gonna start with some onions, which are great anti-inflammatory. And again, when we're thinking about restricted blood cells and the way that our body reacts to the food that we eat, using some of these ingredients are gonna change the condition of our body overall. You might not feel it in 1 or 2 bites, but if you have 1 or 2 meals a day and you start to change your habits where you're eating more anti-inflammatory foods, clean foods that aren't high in pesticides, preservatives, herbicides, chemical fertilizers, your body becomes more familiar with what it's supposed to be eating. And especially if it's highly nutritious too, it's gonna find its energy source right away versus having a bag of potato chips, you smash that, and then you're hungry again because your body is still looking for that nourishment. So nutrient-dense foods is very, very beneficial for that. So I'm gonna use cipollini onions for this because they're a really rich flavor. It's my favorite onion to use. The problem though is that, especially when you find really small ones, they take a little bit longer to peel. I get that. So you could use a larger onion for this recipe as well. And I'm gonna use about 4 because you figure about, we're making two servings. So it's about 2 onions per person. And now with garlic too, garlic is huge with healthy properties. It's loaded with 2 things. It's got carbon and it's got allicin. And both of those things are really beneficial for your body, but you have to smash it, slice it, dice it, chop it, and let it sit for about 10 minutes before you either cook it or consume it. So the properties will actually develop and be stronger and be more beneficial. So if you start this ahead of time, then you can let that develop. And so we use about 4 cloves if you like more. Now these are my preferences on the amounts, and you can really stress yourself out if you worry about measuring everything exactly. Everything really depends on the mood. If you have date night, you're not going to want to have a lot of garlic and onions, perhaps. Maybe you do. But maybe if it's lunch or a casual meal and you really want to absorb and take in those healthy benefits, then you can use more of, let's say, garlic and onions because you really enjoy them, but you won't offend anybody by eating them. And if anybody has questions, again, please put them in the chat. And I'd love to answer for you too. So as I start to get these going, I'm going to heat up my pan a little bit. It's really important to make sure that you start with a hot pan, because if you put in cold ingredients into a cold pan, they end up really just boiling and simmering them as opposed to bringing out its natural flavors quickly. Okay, so we've got our onions, and we're really going to start out with just 3 primary ingredients with this one: onions, garlic, and tomatoes. Use about a tablespoon of avocado oil. Avocado oil is a nice, healthy fat. Consuming a little bit in moderation it's got really good benefits to it because our brain functions with it, and our organs need a little bit of fats to function. So this, I just find
Chef,
it the right.
Chef Pete, I have a.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Chef Pete, I have a question for you.
Sure.
Jordan would like to know, what is the most common hesitation you see people have towards eating a more plant-based diet, and how would you combat that fear?
Flavor. Yeah, I think people think that first of all, they think healthy food is like eating medicine. They think that it doesn't have flavor, it doesn't have the same flavor. They think that they have to have meats, they have to have a steak. You know, and one of the things that I say as a chef is that another chef isn't my competition with food and who makes the best food to a diner. The diner is going to eat something and they're going to compare it to the way that they were raised. They're going to say that either they never had spicy food, for example, when they were a kid, or they never ate Italian food as a kid, they're always going back and making that association to what they first learned about food. So first of all, is to teach them something else, and to have that flavor that is comforting to them, that is familiar to them. And I've cooked Truth and Tonic at Canyon Ranch is the only plant-based restaurant, fully plant-based restaurant on the Strip itself. We're the first, the only. And I did that because there's a growing market for plant-based diners. And with my experience in seeing people, most of the time people will come to me after they've already been dealt the death card. They've been diagnosed with diabetes. They have high cholesterol. They have cancer. They're going through cancer. They never want cancer. And so it's really just getting people to be more preventative and enjoy the food, and using great, healthy, clean, organic, when possible, ingredients, and using and enhancing those flavors is really, it takes inspiration. And I try to inspire people, because I'm not going to say, eat this, don't eat that, or you have to eat my food, it's the best, or whatever it is. It's really just inspire you to say, you know what? I want to learn more. I want to try new things. I want to eat less meat, and I want to feel better. That was a long answer. Okay. We've got our onions cooking. We're going to chop our garlic. I did not add the garlic first because it's going to be small and I don't want it to burn. And then I'm going to add some salt to the onions, because the salt is going to help bring out the water inside the onions itself. And once you bring out the water, it's going to cool the surface just enough where the sugars aren't going to caramelize and brown as fast. If your oil is too hot, of course, it's going to burn it, but you want to cook it slowly and get those flavors out so the onions get soft as opposed to caramelize. Culinary terms, we call that sweating a vegetable versus caramelizing. So we want to sweat it. And now I'm going to add tomatoes. Now I chose heirloom tomatoes for the recipe because they're a little bit more naturally grown sometimes. And I find that, as a comparison inside the grocery stores itself, as opposed to the farmer's market, that they have a little bit more of the flavor that they're used to and that they're supposed to. One of the things with tomatoes is when they're commercially grown is that they're picked in a field that's sometimes really far away. So let's say it's really far away from Las Vegas. And then the tomatoes get shipped here. Once they get shipped here, they're rock hard green because they don't want them to spoil. And then when the grocery store is ready for them, the produce company will put them into like a garage, for example, in a warehouse, close the door, turn on some ethylene gas and a bunch of fans. And then in no time, they have these bright red tomatoes and they have absolutely no flavor. And then we give those to our kids and we wonder why our kids don't like them, because they're just mush and they don't have flavor. They don't have, especially when we get to the wine is all about the terroir and the flavors of the earth, which makes it unique compared to grapes grown of the same varietal in a different region. And it's the same with our food. It's the same with tomatoes. It absorbs the terroir, it absorbs the flavor of the earth. And if we take that out and we don't do that, then we really lose the way that nature intended these things to taste. And when I give somebody organic ingredients as an adult, their eyes light up because they just remember the flavors of grandma's garden or their parents' garden at home. And they're like, holy cow, this tastes so good. And the other thing with tomatoes is that they have lycopene, and that is the red pigment that's in the tomato itself. And the lycopene is another thing that's hard for our body to absorb, but it's really great for our heart health. And there's two ways to absorb that better. One is by cooking them like we're doing today. And the other is to add a little bit more fat. And the higher fat, so if you can eat them raw and you add avocado oil or a little bit of olive oil, then your body will absorb that and get more health benefits as well. And I'm going to add a little bit, a pinch of saffron. If you're not familiar with saffron, now this is optional, but I think it really enhances the pomodoro. It's the stamen, it's the little, it's the pollinator inside the flower itself. And they hand pick them one by one. Okay, so we've got 2 tomatoes in there. The tomatoes are cooking. Now let's go to, first I'm gonna cut these other onions and just slice them, because I'm gonna wilt them with a Swiss chard. People often have a lot of tricks to cutting onions. They'll either put a piece of bread in their mouth, they wear goggles because they don't want to cry. For me, though, the one thing that I found that really helps with that is a sharp knife. A razor sharp knife will slice through the cells of the onion and it won't switch them out. I want to finish this dish with a basil pesto. And so that this would be to put into a food processor, but we're just going to do a really quick pesto with a little bit of oil, garlic. We're going to use a Parmesan cheese and some toasted walnuts, because walnuts, again, are also very good for heart health. They have a lot of great flavor. Basil can turn black on you if you cut it too fine, and with a dull knife, it's going to bruise it. So if you cut it a little bit larger, if you're going to hold it for longer, as opposed to eat it right away, then you can cut it a little bit smaller. And I like to dice. A lot of people will roll it and chiffonade it, but then you get these really long strands and they hang off your spoon, your fork. They end up hanging off your lip. So I like to dice basil instead.
Chef Pete, I have another question for you. This one is from Eric. He would
Hi,
like
Eric.
to know, what can chefs do to broaden their plant-based culinary palette, menu development, and gourmet appeal?
I think that they don't have to try so hard. The ingredients are all available to us. And I have a lot of concerns about heavily processed vegan food as well. We see it in fast food chains now. And to me, again, that goes back to the whole science of in our body not being able to digest it. And so that you have the produce, the vegetables, everything. I'm trying to do this in a very short demo, and I'm using a lot more extensive ingredients, yes, that you would do at home, but it's all basic. It starts with a potato. I put the potato in the oven. There's tomatoes. There's a little bit of seasonings, but there's not a whole lot of tricks. And I'm trying to give a little bit more detail because of the purpose of the demonstration. But typically, I want to explain all this stuff to my customers. I just serve them really great food. To them, it's a really great experience. Hopefully, that's the goal. So I think the chefs have the tools right there, and they just rely on their fryer later a little bit too much sometimes. And it's not all chefs, but generally speaking, they think that they have to have French fries, and customers have to demand it. But I think it's all right there, and they can still just use and adapt to their unique style, and just try it. I think the thing too is that customers are demanding it now, and there's a lot of a chat on Facebook about French fries being the go-to, French fries and salad for a vegan that goes to a restaurant that doesn't have a whole lot of options, because what else is there to eat? So I really encourage chefs to start adding more dishes and try it. I hope, honestly, I hope that one day that we just stop saying that this is vegan and this isn't vegan. I just want it to be, there's no boundaries. It's just great food. It's better for you. It's just our style. It's our culture to cook. When I was feeding 16,000 people a day, we didn't talk about nutrition. We talked about perceived value. We talked about quality. We talked about efficiency. We talk about a great experience, but it wasn't, what are we doing to these people? And now my demonstrations are about you, the individual, you specifically, your health, your feelings, your experience, and the people that I've worked with. There's a guy with lung cancer that When I started cooking for him 2 weeks after his last surgery in 2009, the doctor said, listen, you've had lung cancer 3 times, and you've got a 2% chance to live past 2012. 98% chance of dying. I changed his diet. I cooked for him twice a day for 3 years. So from 2009 to 2012. Previously, his cancer came back every 7 months to a year. Still to today, his cancer's never returned. He's healthy, he's working, he's in his late 60s, and he doesn't have to worry about that anymore. His chances now are the same as everyone else to get cancer again, which is high. 1 in 2 men and 1 in 3 women are diagnosed with cancer in their lifetime. So it's right behind cardiovascular related death, which is like the #1 killer in the US. So as chefs, if we can take the time to be a little more concerned about how our body processes food and what we're feeding to our customers and encourage that healthy experience and healthy dining, we could really make that impact, especially with chefs that are serving a lot of numbers, chefs that are on TV. I think that we forget that it's farm to table, and then we forget that it's actually farm to fuel. Sometimes I like to say that it's farm to toilet, because it's about how it's grown, how our body processes it, how it's being used for food, how we benefit from it, how it's neutral to us, how it hurts us. All that stuff needs to be taken into account with food. Okay. So our pesto has toasted walnuts, Parmesan cheese, lemon juice, avocado oil, basil. Now that all that is prepped, let's roll some gnocchi real quick. So we've let our dough rest. I've got my backup dough just in case. So with this, there's a couple different ways. One, we're just gonna work in a little small chunk at a time. Depending on how sticky it is, a little bit of flour will help it from sticking to your hands. And I like to roll them just under 1 inch thick. This is the fun part. I did this for a party of 1,000 people one time. I made gnocchis for about 3 days, and it was live. People were walking up, and I was cooking a dish and serving it to them right away. And I had a little display of gnocchis there too. And it was probably about less than an hour, and I was out of gnocchis after rolling them for 3 days. And I was literally rolling them and cooking them right in front of them with the backup dough that I had. So I like to use a fork. I'm gonna work over a plate. Now this is the option. You can cook them just as is. And I'll put a little bit down. How are we doing on time? A little bit over?
You're doing good. It's now 5:35.
Okay, almost done. So what I'm doing is I got the fork upside down, and I'm first pressing it into the fork to get the groove, and then I'm just rolling it off. Now the purpose is to help the sauce stick to the gnocchi. They freeze really well, so you can roll them all out now. You can eat what you like, freeze the rest. Okay. Sauce looks good. I'm going to put a pan on for some Swiss chard, the one that came out of the elementary school garden. I've got boiling salted water, which, to say how much salt, well, it's salty like the ocean. And then I'm gonna drop them in. When they float, I'm gonna give them just another few seconds, maybe about another 10 or 15 seconds after they float, and then they'll be finished.
Chef Pete, I have another question from
Great.
Charles. He
Okay.
would like to know, what is your opinion on some of the new non-meat options like Impossible and Beyond Meat?
I think it's too soon to tell. I think that nutritionally, when you see them in fast food chains, they're really comparable to beef products as far as the health. There's, you know, in what I think as well though, is that if you switch from a meat-based diet to a plant-based diet, there's always that, what do I do in between? What do I eat? That kind of that learning curve. And I think that those products are great to fill that gap. I think as you transition, there's something that is really important to have something to eat, to feel comfortable with, to give you confidence, to say, okay, I can do it, I can stick to this diet long enough where I start to feel the benefits and I start to feel great. Then it's like you're determined to stay that way. And like, wow. You know, for me, I work out 6-7 days a week. I eat plant-based. I have for almost 2 years. I don't strictly cook plant-based, but because I have 3 restaurants and only one of them fully is. But I really encourage it, and I think that there's great. So I think that those products are great for, you know, kind of that learning curve. And then the occasional thing, you go out to eat and you're traveling or something like that, and you need another option. I think they're great for that. But if you were to make your diet 100% of that stuff all the time and replace meat with it, I think you'll probably be in the same place as if you were eating a meat-based diet. One of the benefits of a plant-based, eating animal products, you know, we've got this plumbing inside of us. There's like 60,000 miles or so of blood vessels inside of us. And meat products will make Swiss cheese out of those blood vessels because there's the endothelium function, which is really a great filter to keep all the crap that's in our food flowing out of us instead of being absorbed. And it helps prevent that stuff. And so the plant-based diet will help strengthen the endothelium function, which meat products won't do. So I think that it's really scary with some of the stuff that they're doing, because Impossible is not ground up vegetables. It's not a recipe, it's a formula. And formulas are designed to be profitable. And it's being removed from the kitchen and from chefs creating it. And it's scary. It's a science experiment. And so I don't think that it's been around long enough to really see what the long-term effects are going to be of it. Personally, I don't even like the flavor.
Thank you, Chef. And then I have another question from Alexandra. She would like to know, what's your go-to dish to make after a long day of work?
Oh, good question. A go-to dish. It depends. You know, I always get the question of what's my favorite dish to make, and I don't have one. It changes. It changes based on mood. It changes based on, I saw something that inspired me and I want to try it for myself, or went to a great restaurant, had a great dish. You know, I want to do that too. But yeah, when there's certain days where I cook a lot, and it's a little bit more basic. Usually I put a lot of miles on this pot because I like to do one pot dishes too. So that way it's a little bit faster to clean up and to set up and all that stuff. I kind of put things in the pot, and then there's less things to wash afterwards and that sort of thing. So that's my go-to.
And then Karen would like to know, Do you have any recommendations to store food in something other than plastic containers?
Yeah, there's glass is great. The big concern with plastic too is putting them in the microwave. It's convenient to reheat. Meal prep is a big thing, but the chemicals that are released into the food is very sketchy. So I say glass, ceramic, things like that are great. Teflon is really great to use too, but you got to remember, if there's a scratch in it, then that scratch will start to contaminate the food, and it could be carcinogenic. So I don't spend a whole lot of money on Teflon pans because once they're scratched or worn out, it's time to throw them away and get a new one.
And then Louise would like to know, without meat, don't you get more hungry? How do you balance eating greens?
Whole grains, I think, is a great way to, there's so much food to eat too. There, rice and beans and lentils, quinoa, all that stuff has complete proteins. So that it's got all 9 essential amino acids, which is, what we find is probably the most, the only thing that would be beneficial coming out of an animal is that they already have those 9 amino acids that we need to absorb through food. Our body needs 20 amino acids, 11 we can make, 9 of them need to come from our food. So there's so many things to eat. I do a lot of lentils and rice and beans and things like that too. All right. I want to add, let's see. Okay, so we're good. I'm ready. You guys ready to eat? So I add a little bit of sauce to my gnocchi. They came up to, the water came back to a boil. I let them simmer for a little bit. We got our beautiful Swiss chard. I'm gonna squeeze just a little bit of lemon onto it, onions. You could add garlic to it as well if you like. I'm gonna add a little bit of Parmesan cheese directly over the gnocchi. And then we're gonna add some of the Swiss chard. Our pesto with basil, walnuts, Parmesan cheese, garlic, a little bit of avocado oil. We're gonna put that right around the dish. So as you eat the gnocchi, you take some of the tomatoes that are nice and soft and melted. They have a little bit of water that they cooked out to kind of make the sauce with it. We got our Swiss chard, which has got this really sweet, beautiful flavor to it. All these healthy ingredients in a nice little pasta dish. Before I let you go, if you want to see pictures, I'll post them on my Instagram at Chef Ghione. It's also Facebook as well as the same. And then for Flavors for Life, we have a culinary competition. This is the first year that we're going to do a chef's competition. 21 chefs will be able to compete for $1,000. They submit a healthy recipe to us. We approve it, they cook it, and they serve it, and they're judged by 5 judges. And so if you would like to participate, contact me, please, and I will set you up with an entry. That'll be April 29th. It'll be a full day on a Thursday. We hope to get chefs involved. I'm especially trying to reach those chefs that have been furloughed or have their jobs have been lost because of COVID and give them the opportunity to win $1,000. Questions?
I don't see any other questions in the chat just now. Okay, one more just came through from Louise. She would like to know what inspired you to eat plant-based.
I mean, honestly speaking, I haven't always been the healthiest. I'm a recovering alcoholic. I've got just over 3 years of sobriety. I always worried about other people's health. and I wasn't necessarily paying attention to my own disease. And I just knew. I studied, I did research, I saw the effects that it was having on families and positive impacts. I see families now watching their kids graduate from high school, graduate from college, buying their first house. All these things have happened, and they're still alive to see it. And other people that have incurable leukemia that had 3 years to live, and they're still alive 10 years later. Why am I not doing that for myself? And I wanted to try it. And I knew, of course, I've got a lot of cooking experience and I can cook good food. I wanted to see how I felt. I was going to the gym at the time. My goals were to gain lean muscle. And there's a lot of documentaries. There's a lot of people trying it. The market is growing. The available options are out there. There's tons of restaurants all over Las Vegas for dining experiences. And I just said, you know what? I got to see it for myself. And I stick to it because I like to speak with you to you with integrity, knowing that I'm not going to suggest you do something that I'm not willing to do for myself. Wellness is an individual journey. You have to know where your health is right now, where you need it to go, and understand what you're eating, whether it's going to help you get there or if it's going to slow down, stop, or reverse your progress to wellness. And I'd like to fill in that gap for other people as well.
And then Andrew would like to know, you mentioned that you work out regularly throughout the week. What would be a typical plant-based post-workout meal that you eat? And would it be more comparable to the more common protein-based meals?
Usually what I like to do is I'll prep up some rice ahead of time and some cooked beans. I like to have rice and beans, and then I literally right in the same bowl as I'll put a salad right on top. And sometimes to that salad, I'll eat tofu with it, or I'll eat, add lentils into it as well. And that's where I get a lot of vitamins and fiber. And the only other thing that it really is missing is B12. And I take a supplement for B12 too. That helps your body to actually process the food that you eat, to turn it to energy, especially absorb the protein that you're eating too. So so those things like that is, once rice and beans are combined, like I mentioned, the all 9 essential amino acids, rice has some and beans has the other. So combined, it makes a complete protein.
And Eric would like to know, I think this is our last question before we turn it over to Joe. Eric would like to know, what is the non-plant-based dish or food you miss most? Cheeseburger, sausage pizza, steak, or fried chicken?
I grew up near New Haven, Connecticut, which is the pizza there is absolutely amazing. So I would have to say that I miss pizza. I miss East Coast pizza. I don't really find that here in Las Vegas. There's a couple good ones, but there it's amazing.
All right, fantastic.
All right. So
Jack, would you like
before
to
we
pop
turn it
back
over
on?
to Joe.
There we go.
Yeah, I want to pop back on. So before we turn it over to Joe, I just want to say just a great big thank you to Chef Pete Ghione. What an amazing presentation tonight. Thank you so much for the effort, for putting together that wonderful meal. I hope everyone out there had a good time and was able to follow along and prepare the dish and is enjoying it right now. I'm sure everyone is thirsty and is excited and ready to taste a couple of these great wines that our master sommelier has for us to taste this evening. So without further ado, I'd like to get you guys rolling with our master sommelier, Joseph Phillips. Joseph Phillips traces his love for wine back to 2 distinct individuals, a college professor who not only introduced him to fine wine, but also to Irish Stout and Chinatown in Boston, and a restaurant manager who was fixated on the thought of devoting an entire refrigerator to storing wine before the proliferation of dedicated wine fridges. These outside influences lured Joe out of his sheltered East Coast upbringing and tapped into his sense of adventure. Once he caught the wine and food bug, there was no turning back. Before he realized what was happening, he was stalking the used bookstores, scouring the racks for any texts that were related to wine. Joe was part of the opening team at the Bellagio Resort in Las Vegas, became a master sommelier during his tenure there. He is an active examiner and educator for Court of Master Sommeliers and a certified educator for wine and sake through the WSET. He previously managed award-winning wine programs for Aqua Sensei and Michael Mina. Joe left the Bellagio to become the director of wine for the MGM Grand Resort in Las Vegas. Currently, Joe is the educational specialist for Southern Glazers Wine and Spirits of Nevada and has been a part-time instructor teaching wine courses at UNLV's William F. Harrah College of Hospitality since 2017. It's so wonderful to have you here, ladies and gentlemen, Master Sommelier Joe Phillips.
Thanks, Jack. It's great to be here. So we want to get a couple of things accomplished today. One is teaching you or letting you know about the wines that we've chosen, that I've chosen. But also, our theme is heart health. So let's get some of that tied in, right? So what is it? Maybe you've heard the saying, a glass of red wine is good for your heart, it's good for your health. So what is it exactly, and why red wine? Why not white wine? Why not a glass of bourbon or something like that? So what is it specifically in the red wine? And it seems to be tied to the antioxidants that are coming from the plant compounds that are highest concentration in the skins, to some degree in the seeds, and maybe even the stems. And the reason there's more of them in red wine than white is because of the winemaking process used. Because, there's polyphenols and in white grape skins and the seeds as well. But the difference is when we make red wine, we need to let that wine ferment in contact with the skins to extract the color. And while it's extracting the color, it's extracting the big one that they point to for this tie into heart health is something called resveratrol. And I'm sure there's a few other antioxidants thrown in there as well. So this is the reason why it's often referred to as red wine, being that's what's healthy for you. Now, I got to give a couple of disclosures here. One of them is I sell wine for a living. So just remember that. I definitely have an ulterior motive. The more wine I get you to buy, the better off I am, right? But on the other side, it has to be done in moderation. I mean, anything that I think it's Paracelsus who's quoted with that, it's the dose that makes the poison. So basically anything in high enough concentration will kill you. It's just that certain substances do it in very small amounts. Well, alcohol and wine is one of those things where too much, not so great. But there's a lot of research that's showing that small amounts, moderate amounts, can be very beneficial. And the way it acts is it seems that this resveratrol, some of the studies that have come out say that it can lower your LDL, which is the bad cholesterol. It can help increase HDL. And then there's a few other things that it helps reduce blood clots. It's a mild sedative. Not the resveratrol, but alcohol is a mild sedative. So these are all things that can sort of help calm you down a little bit. So there's definitely some benefits there. But the truth is we don't have enough studies to definitively say you need to drink X amount of wine, red wine, to, prevent heart disease or something like that. We don't have that data. But the other side is, we've been drinking wine as human beings for 10,000 years, at least 6,000, probably closer to 10,000, maybe even more. So like Chef Pete was saying, we've kind of learned to adapt to wine, especially if it's made in a very natural way. And that's important as well, because it's easy now. You can get a lot of alcohol products that really are almost made at a laboratory because they're extracted, like some of the things out there that aren't necessarily being derived from grapes. You're getting the alcohol from other places. So that's sort of that side. So let's talk a little bit about the red wine that we've chosen. So we'll start there. The task was, let's choose a wine that's going to go well with the dish. So I was sent over the list of ingredients, and the way I'm looking at it, I'm looking for big building blocks. What are the primary things that are in this dish that are going to affect your perception of the wine? And for me, in food, it's sweetness. Is there sugar? Is there a significant source of sugar coming from fruit, perhaps, or syrups or something else in a dish? Is there a significant source of protein or umami? And is it concentrated? Like, is it Parmesan cheese, or is it fish sauce or soy sauce or something that's been fermented? And then the other thing we look for is acidity in the dish, and we look for I look for bitterness. So when I looked at chef's ingredients, first there's a sweet potato, but even though we have the sweet in the name, it's really not that sweet. It's not a significant source of sugar, so I don't worry about that so much. It's more of a textural element. However, it's the tomato sauce. Tomatoes have a lot of umami, and they have a lot of acid. So what I'm already thinking is, I need a wine with a higher amount of acid as well, because that's what we need to sort of balance each other out. There's also potentially a little bit of bitterness coming from that Swiss chard. And so if I'm choosing a red wine to go with this dish, what I want to look for is a red wine that has a little less of the tannin. And the tannin is one of the compounds extracted from skins, and it gives wine when wines have a lot of tannin, you feel it on your cheeks and gums. It dries out your mouth. So anybody who likes to drink California Cabernet Sauvignon or dark Malbecs and Syrah, they have a lot of tannin, and you feel it, and it really dries out your mouth. So I want to find a dish, a wine that is higher in acid, lower in tannin, and also a moderate amount of alcohol. So already, and just looking at the tomatoes, and my background is Italian American. I got a lot of ancestors that came from the south of Italy, and that's where we grow a lot of those tomatoes and things like that. So I went to Italy for the red wine. And so what I chose was from Tuscany. There's a region called Chianti Classico, and this Classico region is in the hills. If you look at Italy, yes, it's basically a peninsula coming out, and you got the water on both sides, but right where Tuscany is, there's the Apennine mountain ranges right in the center. And those hills protect it and give it a very different climate, because you can plant on elevation. And I know I got at least one former student on, so he'll understand when we talk about rain shadow and planting at elevation. So this is a very special place for grape growing. They're using a grape called Sangiovese, which is naturally very high in acidity. And in this style and at this price point, this is not a very expensive wine. You know, it costs it's about $15 or so at the wine store. So that's a pretty moderate price for an imported wine. And actually, you want this because a more expensive wine would have more tannin. It would probably even have more alcohol. So the fact that this is very affordable and made in a very authentic and natural, old school way, if you will, it makes it very perfect for this dish. So one of the things that we do is, if you have some and you're tasting it, if you want to taste along with me, if you can see it in this camera, this has this beautiful, almost cherry-like color. And in my glass, I see this little hint of orange out towards the edge. But then when I smell it, I'm getting a lot of cherry, strawberry, a lot of red fruit. It's definitely on the tart side. So it's cranberry, pomegranate, cherry, and there's an herbal side like rhubarb. And I also get this kind of iron, almost minerally sort of aroma that comes from the wine. And then when I taste it, take a small amount, swirl it around, make sure it gets on all of the receptors on my cheeks, my gums, my tongue. And when I taste it, My mouth is watering a little bit. I get a very slight little bit of this drying sensation, but overall it's a very light, elegant wine. And this is the kind of wine that works really well with a lot of food. But I think especially when we're dealing with tomatoes, what you'll find is that the tomatoes, the acidity in the tomatoes actually make this wine taste fruitier and a little less tart. So that's one of the reasons why I chose this particular one. So this is the Banfi Chianti Classico. I've got the 2017 vintage, but it does hold up. So even if you've got an older vintage, it's probably actually drinking a little bit better. So that's the red wine. So let's talk about white wine and why, how come white wine doesn't, because I actually prefer white wine, and how come white wine isn't good for your heart, you know? Well, the truth is it might be, but one of the differences is with most white wines, you don't have the skin contact to extract the polyphenols. However, there are a lot of studies that show just alcohol itself might have health benefits. Again, it's in moderation. And in fact, if you do a little research and Googling, there's a current trend which they call microdosing of alcohol, which is like really small amounts and spread out over time. Now, I don't really know if it's a good idea or not, but the point is that the reason people are paying attention to this is because there does seem to be a health benefit to low doses of alcohol. So in that respect, maybe the white wine there are still some benefits to it. Again, in moderation, because too much can really destroy your life. So you have to be careful with all of that stuff. But the white wine that I have chosen is from Oregon. And it's called Acrobat. And this is from Oregon. It's a Pinot Gris. And the reason I chose this is I wanted to have something from the United States as well. I also wanted to give you a white wine option because I prefer white in general. I'd rather drink white than red, even if I were eating a steak or a plant-based equivalent of a steak, you know, something like that. I would still want white wine because that's my own personal palate. But the same sort of principles apply. I still need a wine that's high in acid. I need a wine that's going to be more in that moderate alcohol level. So, and let me take a minute and talk about what's a moderate level of alcohol. So for instance, a California Cabernet probably is going to be somewhere in the 14.5 to 16% alcohol by volume, right? This Chianti is about 12.5%. So that means it's about 25% less alcohol just by switching to this Italian red within that alcohol range. So that moderate alcohol level is somewhere between 9 and 12%. And overall, it's a good idea to be there. You know, that's what I find, because it doesn't hit you quite as hard, you know. And then, so this white wine from Oregon, a little bit cooler. You're getting that marine influence from the Pacific Ocean, which basically makes Oregon several degrees cooler compared to California. And what that does is it allows the wines it slows down sugar development. So when we turn them into wine, they're not as high as in alcohol. And it also helps them retain a certain amount of crispness and freshness from the acid. So with this one, this is Acrobat Pinot Gris. For me, it's all about these, the red apple. It's red apples and pears, peaches. There is this little like a crunchy green, like arugula or spinach or something like that. There's this celery as well. And then tasting. The initial attack is really fruity. I really taste that, you know, some of the sunshine that would have happened in Oregon, because in Oregon, the sun comes out for about 2.5 months in the summer, and it allows the grapes to get ripe, and then it starts raining again. So you can taste that little bit of sunshine that they get. Makes your mouth water, no alcohol burn, and pretty delicious stuff. And this also might help I think it would work for different reasons than the red, but basically it helps, it actually might taste much fruitier, almost sweet, when you paired it with the pomodoro sauce on the gnocchi. So that's the reason I chose what I did. I don't know, any questions?
I do have a question for you from Jordan. He wants to know if you're invited to a dinner party and want to give a bottle of wine as a gift, but you have no idea what the menu is or what the host prefers, what's a classic go-to bottle you'd always recommend?
Ooh, great. I actually got a couple of them. And actually it ties into some of the principles that we talked about today. So what you're looking for, if you want that one wine that more or less is relatively food friendly, what you want to stick with is you want a wine that's somewhat neutral. And here's what I mean by that. You don't necessarily want a wine that's been aged in new oak barrels that's going to be all cinnamon, toast, spice, all that. And you also want a wine that is more in that moderate alcohol and has more acidity. So what you want is a wine kind of like an Italian Pinot Grigio for the white. And that could be a wine from France in a region called Chablis, or it could be Sauvignon Blanc from New Zealand. These are the styles. You want no oak, you want moderate alcohol, and a lot of mouth-watering acidity and freshness. Those wines are very food friendly. For red, same thing. You don't necessarily want to come in with a really expensive Napa Valley Cabernet, although they're delicious. They're less food friendly, meaning the dishes they go with are a little more specific, right? So you need a Pinot Noir, perhaps, or a nice Chianti, or maybe something from a Burgundy, or somebody is saying Champagne. Champagne is fantastic. Or Gerard Bertrand has a wine, the Cremant de Limoux, which is basically like Champagne, but from the south of France, and it's about $30 less than your average bottle. So something like that is fantastic. That's what I would do. Riesling is good too. You could go a dry style or even an off-dry style, like a good German Riesling, like Dr. Lawson, Blue Slate, or something like that. Really food friendly. So hopefully that helps. And
Jordan would like you to repeat the champagne option, if you can.
So champagne, right? So let's talk about champagne itself. The real stuff is coming from the Champagne region of France. So in order to have that designation, the grapes have to come from that region, and they have to be made using what we call the traditional method, which means they made wine, put it into a bottle, and induced a secondary fermentation by adding a little bit of yeast and sugar for the yeast to eat, and sealed it. And that's what produces the bubbles. And then they have to let it age for at least a year before they can release it. So that's what makes champagne, one of the things that makes champagne special. Now, you can find wines that are made using a very similar technique, the same technique actually, from the same grapes, but if you get them from other parts of the world, you can save yourself some money and get something that is not necessarily exactly the same, but pretty close. So the wine I mentioned is from a producer called Gerard, Gerard, Bertrand, Bertrand, and he's a producer in the south of France, and he actually makes a sparkling wine called Cremant. It's Cremant. You want to look for that term on a French wine label, Cremant, because it basically tells you that the wine was made using the same technique they use in Champagne, but it didn't come from Champagne. So it's a Cremant de Limoux. Limoux is a region in the south of France. It's up in the hills. It's in the foothills of the Pyrenees. And it's delicious. And like I said, it's probably 20s, somewhere in the $15 to $25. And and it comes in rosé. So it's delicious. There you go. Somebody wrote it out for you. That's great. Thanks, Charles. What else?
And then Andrew would like to know, Yes, you're at the grocery store and staring at the endless shelves of wine. What factors do you consider when picking out a new bottle of wine you have not tried yet? Brand, pricing, origin, etc.
Yeah, so for me, and remember, like I'm kind of, I guess in some ways when it comes to wine, I'm not an average person just because I really do see it from a very different perspective. It's no less valid than yours. It's just from a different perspective. So for me, what I'm looking for is either a region that I've had to study for exams, but never actually tried. And that's really primarily what I look for, whether if I'm visiting a bar, I would always look at the back bar for spirit products that I had to learn about and study for these exams, but never actually had a chance to taste. So I'm looking for those. So regions that I've never tasted before, but also brands that maybe I haven't tasted before. So, and then that's kind of what drives it. Otherwise, I just go for, if I have a purpose in mind, it's either what I want to drink, or if I want to pair it with food, then I already have in my mind that I might need something sweet like a German Riesling, or maybe something more full-bodied like California Cabernet, depending on what the dish is.
And then Albert would like to know, he says he's more of a red person, but does enjoy both red and white, but seems with his limited knowledge, whites are more New World wines. Is that true? And if not, do you prefer an Old World or New World white wine?
Ooh, okay, so let's start with the Old World versus the New World. In general, what I like from my white wines is lower alcohol, meaning 12.5%, somewhere around there. And I like more acidity, and I like my wines without new oak. So that's what I look for. I don't really care where it came from. I want those characteristics. But if you're, since we're in Las Vegas, it's always like, you learn to play the odds. Well, the odds are that if you go with an Old World wine and it's not very expensive, it's probably going to be moderate alcohol, higher in acidity, and no oak aging, right? So that's what I look for. Now, the truth is there's probably a lot more white wine. Actually, there's a lot of Old World regions. I mean, France, you look at Alsace, 90% of the wines, that's on the German border. 90% of the wine they produce is white. And they also produce a Cremant d'Alsace. You can get Lucien Albrecht, Albrecht. That's another Cremant that's like Champagne, that's much more affordable. You can find that too. So Alsace, Burgundy. Burgundy makes white and red wines, but most of their wine production now is white, 56%. So there's a lot of white wine coming from there. Italy, especially in the north, they make quite a bit of white wine, especially from the Veneto, the Pinot Grigios, the Sauvignon Blancs that come out of northern Italy, Prosecco, right? So, Tuscany is 90% red, but northern Italy makes a lot of white wine. So, and then if Spain, mostly red. You have to go to like the northeast to Albarine, to Rias Baixas, up to the northwest. So I would say, what would you look for? Well, if you like red, you may want a wine aged in oak. You may want a more full-bodied style of white wine, which usually means you might have to pay a little more money. But if you look for some of the Chardonnays that are coming out of Sicily, you want Chardonnays that are coming out of Australia to a degree, United States, white Burgundy. But you need to get a village name on there. You can't just have regular Burgundy or even Macon or something like that, because they tend to use less oak. So you want something aged in oak, a little more full body, is my guess, What else?
Jordan would like to know, are there any major scams to avoid, like marketing terms that mean nothing but cost us more?
Okay, yes. Well, I guess in some ways, yeah, like almost anything could be, even like, say you take European wine, which is highly regulated. And Like for instance, this Chianti, Banfi makes a Chianti Classico Reserva. Well, that Reserva tells you that the wine has been aged for at least 2 years. Okay, so, but that still doesn't, and you're going to pay more for it. But does it mean it's better quality? Well, maybe, maybe not, right? So the thing is, in the United States and a lot of the New World countries, some of those terms like reserve, special selection, vineyard select, they're not regulated. So you don't really know what you're getting. So you have to be careful with some of those terms. I think the biggest sort of, not really a scam, but you have to be careful, right? There's a big trend right now. It's kind of been, a certain celebrity has resurrected this whole thing. Oh my God, there's so many chemicals in wine. And yes, there can be a lot of things that, especially at the inexpensive level, if you're not spending, say, more than $10 for a bottle of wine, then you have to wonder, how did they get it so cheap? So as long as you're at a little higher price point, let's say, and that doesn't have to be that high, right? Maybe $12 to $20. And you're looking at a region like maybe Chile or Italy or France or something like that, or even the United States. What you want is a wine where basically they harvest the grapes, they crush up the juice, they let it ferment. They really don't do a lot of stuff to the wine. They just kind of let it take its course, and then you put it into a bottle. And there's a lot of wine like that. So I guess what I'm saying is you don't necessarily have to buy the wine that a celebrity says you should buy because their wine doesn't have all the stuff. There's wines, there are so many wines all over the place that are made by small family producers that they're basically making wine the same way they have for many, many centuries, Yeah, natural wine. And be careful with the term, because natural wine is very vague. There's starting to be definitions for it, but it's starting to become regulated, but so far it's really not regulated. I would say more like, for me, what I suggest for people is look for importers. There is a really famous importer called Kermit Lynch. He has a wine store in North Berkeley. And he was part of this natural movement back in the 70s. And all the wines that he works with are family owned. They do natural. They are basically doing organic. Either they're certified or they're doing organic practices. And that's natural wine, so you can find it. So sometimes you want to look for who's the importer. What are they specializing in? But Kermit Lynch is a good one to find, because pretty much everything that they import is wonderful wine that's made and is about as natural as you can get it. So what else? Oh, I see a question here about monthly wine box delivery subscriptions. The thing about those, I think it depends on you. Like for me, I've never subscribed to them because I don't really know what I'm getting. And also I have access to all kinds of stuff. So I don't really subscribe to them. If it's convenient for you and you get introduced to new things, it's great. Are there other ways you could do the same thing? Yeah, probably. Like you could probably go to a really good wine shop, and there's quite a few of them here in Las Vegas, and just go and buy do your own subscription. But it just means a little more work for you. So I don't really have thoughts about the wines box deliveries so much. It can be kind of fun. What else? Affordable now, much pricier, and we should buy right now. Oh, that's a good question. I'm not sure that we're necessarily getting any. I think what you have to do is, I would say right now, and I guess it's insider information, because I work for the largest distributor in Nevada. And in Nevada, our biggest customers historically have been the resorts. So we get products like Opus One. It doesn't go, there's very little of it that goes into a retail area. So in order to get Opus One, you have to be on the mailing list, or you have to go to the resort, because that's where the allocations go. Well, right now, the resorts aren't taking a lot of their allocations. So some of this stuff is ending up in some of the retail stores. So that's sort of what you might look for. They're not necessarily super cheap now, but so that's what I would look for, is some things that normally you wouldn't be able to find in stores. Some of these more expensive items, you might have access to them if that's something that you're interested in. And the other thing is, I think all of us are in an inventory reduction phase. So just going to, you know, Lee's Liquor, Total Wine, Corey's, any of these places, you're going to find specials, and just take advantage of them. So what else? I see a question here. Eric is looking for an alternative investment. What you mean? You want to invest in fine wine or something else? So I'm not quite sure where that's coming from.
I think Charles was just giving Eric a little bit grief for asking about what wine should he buy right now.
Yeah, no, I would, you know, that's, you know, what you do is, if you want to look for the deals, do a quick search for what are the Wine Spectator top 100. What are some of the high scoring wines? And historically, what are some of the big brands? You know, because all of a sudden, things that normally you couldn't get at a retail shop unless you were on the mailing list, they might be available now. I mean, it's possible that I know a lot of people in town that have their they're on the mailing list for Harlan Estate, Screaming Eagle, things like that. So they're not going to be cheap wines, but you might be able to get your hands on some. And just being able to get some of those trophy wines is something that usually doesn't happen. What else? Let's see. What else we got? So it looks like tips on preparing for a business or formal dinner situation and navigating the wine menu. Ooh, red or white wine that's safe, representative, someone who may or may not have basic knowledge. Okay, so let's see. So for red wines, let's talk about red wines for a second, and let's think about where do you want to go in flavor profile. So you can, one of the things is look for similar wines that are outside of the premium areas. So Napa Valley still is relatively expensive, but if you get, so Napa Valley Cabernet, you're going to pay a lot more for, but you might be able to look at getting Cabernet Sauvignon from one of the other counties, like Paso Robles or San Luis Obispo, but Paso Robles in particular. You can look at Sonoma, you know, you can look at some of those areas, and you're going to find, because they're not as well known overall, you're going to find some values there. So you want to look for some of those. Look for Mendocino, look for Oregon, things like that. Some of these wines that are going to be a little less expensive, but are going to be very food friendly. They can be. As far as Europe, south of France, actually, for red wines, places like the Languedoc-Roussillon. So you want to be looking for things from the south of France. You want to be looking for Roussillon Village, some of these things, and Châteauneuf-du-Pape, Côte du Rhône. So if you like Châteauneuf-du-Pape, you look for Côte du Rhône, Cotesdurhone, because it's a much more affordable version of the Châteauneuf-du-Pape. But south of France is great. Sicily is fantastic, whites and reds. And also the Veneto of Italy, so the northeastern part of Italy. So Veneto, Sicily, southern part of France, and then just go outside of Napa in California or Washington or Oregon, and you're going to find good stuff. What else? Let's see. So Champagne landscape looks like. So yeah, there's a lot of leftover inventory. I can tell you that right now. And I'm not sure how we're going to navigate it all. As far as Champagne overall, what I can say is that in Las Vegas, we were hit really hard because of the nature of our economy. We're really top heavy, where most of our revenue is driven by activity in the resort corridor. And that trickles down to every aspect of our lives. Well, we got hit, we got just destroyed. And that's not going to come back probably for at least another year or two, and maybe 3 before it's back up to normal. But other parts of the world, they're not the same. So Champagne isn't suffering, the region of Champagne. But here in Las Vegas, yes, look for deals because people will probably be trying to unload inventory because they're going to have to get rid of current stock, and they're going to need to make room for the new vintages and new releases. So that's what you just want to look out for. You have to be careful, but just look out there. So let me see. Favorite French region for red? Ooh, that's a good question. So for me, for the red wines, yeah, Beaujolais is a good one. But, and you know what, even, in fact, let me go grab the bottle because I had the first wine of 2020 not too long ago. And it was downtown at a little local wine bar downtown. But I actually had, in November, I had a bottle of 2020 wine. I saved the bottle just for significance, but this was a Beaujolais Nouveau from a really small producer. It's Laurence Remy Dufetre is the producer, but that's delicious, right? So Beaujolais, but look for some of the cru. You want to look for labels that don't say Beaujolais. They say things like Moulin à Vent. They'll say Régnier. They'll say Morgon. They have other words. There's 10 great villages in the Beaujolais region, and they put the name of the village on there. Those are some of the really great wines. I like Burgundy. I like the south of France. I like an area called Bandol, B-A-N-D-O-L. Yeah, so those are some of the cool areas. Yeah, Saint-Emilion is great as well. It's just harder to find affordable, high quality Saint-Emilion and Bordeaux in general in Las Vegas. It's much easier on the East Coast because more people want like that moderately priced Bordeaux. Where here in Las Vegas, mostly what we get is the super expensive high-end stuff. What else?
I think we have one more question. Okay.
Yeah.
Are you saying that one? Okay, good. I was going to say, I think
Is it the $2 Chuck one? Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's talk about $2 Chuck. Okay, so it started when there was a glut of grapes in California, and basically a lot of these producers were selling off higher quality grapes to the and it was bottled. The people behind Charles Shaw took advantage of it, and they were able to make a decent wine at a very affordable price. But the glut is gone, and so, but they're still making that wine. So you just have to ask yourself, how are they making, like, it almost costs more for the glass and the cork and the label. So where, if the $3 or $4 or whatever $2 Chuck goes for now, because it's not $2 anymore, where's it coming from? So you have to ask those questions. If it's too cheap, what kind of a deal are you really getting, right? So for me, I would rather go to some of these older, like some of the more old world regions, Italy, France, some of the wines that are coming over here that are still affordable, but they're still pretty authentic because of the regulations that are involved, and they're an expression of where they came from. So that's just what I like. I want a wine to basically taste like where it came from. $2 Chuck basically tastes like California wine, not a specific part. I want to know. I was recently in Mendocino, and the wines up there have a very different flavor than Napa. So if I'm drinking California wine, I want to know where in California is it coming from? And I want to be able to taste some of that stuff. So that's my own personal take on it. So, any other questions?
Fantastic. Well,
Right. Yeah, good. All right.
I think that might be it. Thank you so much, Joe. I am actually going to have Jack pop back on to do the outro. Jack, are you around?
I am here. Wow. That was just absolutely amazing, Joe. What an education on fine wines. Well, really all kinds of wines. Everybody has to be thirsty. For those of you that got to eat, I hope they enjoyed their food. I hope they got to pair their food with these two wonderful wines that Joe shared with us tonight. I hope everyone got to answer or got all their questions answered. I hope they enjoyed themselves tremendously. There's, obviously some more fun to be had for the mixer and stuff. But in terms of closing out tonight's session for Cook Like a Rebel, that's going to be a wrap. We thank everyone for joining us. Of course, we do have another event coming up in March for our, St. Patrick's Day theme. It's going to be a St. Patrick's Day themed event. Let's make sure that for all of you that are out there on social channels, to give us a like on Facebook and check out Instagram and our Twitter accounts and so on and so forth. Make sure that you check out more of our Rebels. Cook Like a Rebel. Rebels Give Week is coming up March 2nd and 3rd. Don't forget to make your donations. This is the biggest week of the year. Don't forget to check out some of the wines. Don't forget, if you didn't get a chance to watch this whole video or you want to go back, this video will be posted on YouTube over the next few days. So that should be up, I'm guessing, like Tuesday or something like that. If you guys have any questions, you should be able to get with us. Candace, is there a way for people to send their questions that you would like to add? If anybody has any, would be kind of a good way.
Of course. If anyone has any questions or anything that wasn't answered, you can feel free to send those to me and I can get them over to Joe and or to Chef Pete. And then I think Chef Pete also talked about his Instagram and Facebook page. So you can feel free to follow him on those channels and direct message him that way as well. Joe, I don't know, do you have social media as well too that you'd like to share with anyone?
I don't really use it. So,
but Joe, Joe has a shop, so let's not forget that if anybody wants to go and check out Joe's wines, Joe does have a shop in town.
Well, I don't have a shop. We supply all the shops. We're the we supply the liquor and the wines to everybody. So, yeah, that's all. You can find me on the UNLV the UNLV directory, though. I'm there. Get in touch with me that way.
So if you want to know about Joe, there you go. All right, everyone. Well, thanks for joining us tonight. It's been an amazing evening. Thanks so much. And we will see you guys next month for St. Patty's Day. Thanks a lot.